So the second element is movement, a movement. It's not enough for a villain to have an idea or to understand or have a strategy. Yes, they need a strategy probably to create chaos. But how do you follow up on chaos? A movement needs to be organized. So Advani began to organize 3 groups to work together. A youth wing called the RSS, a political party called the BJP, and a more global organization called the VHP. And he brought discipline and organization. He appointed key people, he set goals, so that the momentum from the chaos that he was going to cause would be harvested into an advantage for the extremists. So a movement is simply the organization that follows up on the strategy, and it recruits people and hopefully rules the country afterwards. If there's no movement, then this kind of moment that the villain orchestrates can't be turned into something more permanent. So we have to remember about 4 key characteristics about movements. Movements bring organization. Sometimes they're used to raise an army. At the very least, their aim is to recruit many to the cause. And often this is not the skill of the villain necessarily. He brings alongside him experts in running organizations and groups. Also, movements create funding. Organizations take money to work. There are people to be paid. There might be a mob to be equipped. An army may need to be armed. Mobs need to be fed. Often a foreign funder is the key. For example, ISIS were bankrolled by wealthy Saudi and Qataris, at least in its early phase. Hezbollah in Lebanon exists primarily due to the largesse of the Iranian government. But often, a movement will need to resort to criminal racketeering to keep going, such as kidnapping or raids or extortion, especially if it doesn't have a generous foreign funder. Then, movements bring recruits. The primary reason for a movement is to organize numbers to come into the extremist cause. Although it doesn't always mean that they're seeking to recruit everyone. The Bolsheviks that took over Russia in 1917 were an elite group. They didn't believe in mass recruitment. But nevertheless, movements exist to gather a core of committed and trained supporters so that power can effectively be seized and some sort of a replacement government can be attempted. And finally, movements create belonging. This may be the most important element of a movement. It's the capacity to provide a family of belonging which displaces one's natural family of origin. Islamic extremist recruiters, for example, are always on the lookout for mostly young men that seem to be estranged from their families. And when they find such a person, they use a tactic that is called love bombing. That person is befriended. He's bombarded by love until all that matters to him is pleasing those in the movement. And when a person gets to that stage, they're capable of any act that serves the extremist cause. Their morality has been rewired. So the Hindutva movement swept into power, first for 13 days in 1996, then in 1998 for 6 years until 2004. And that was a year an election was unexpectedly lost and Christians breathed a huge sigh of relief. But remember, if a movement is well organized and well led, it has the capacity to recover and retrench. And it keeps the key people on board and it gets ready to exploit another opportunity when it comes along. And so from 2004 until 2014, the movement gained new leadership. Advani was ousted in June 2013 and replaced by Narendra Modi, who was an even more fanatical ideologue and if it was possible, an even more electrifying public speaker. Modi brought a new generation into the movement, as well as a new strategy. The Hindutva leadership recruited thousands to go to the villages and spread the message from the bottom up. Hindu extremists had usually been led by high caste Brahmins, and their appeal among the lower castes was understandably very limited. But Modi was a man without any formal education. His father was a tea seller on a railway platform. And in May 2014, the BJP stormed back to power in a landslide victory with Modi at the helm. And although he's careful not to antagonize minorities in his public statement, quietly the word then went out to terrorize minorities without fear of government justice ever catching up with you. So attacks on Christians and churches began to rise spectacularly again.